They ignored the warning sign cave, exploring gone wrong. Welcome back to Uncovered History. Today, we're diving deep into 3 chilling tales of cave exploration gone awry. But be warned, in our final story, you're going to witness how even the most prepared adventurers can't always control the elements. If you're claustrophobic, this one might be a tough watch, so proceed with caution. As always, viewer discretion is advised. If you ever find yourself at Indiana's Spring Mill State Park, you might stumble upon the surface path connecting 2 beautiful caves, Bronson Cave and Donaldson Cave. Unbeknownst to many, these caves are linked underground by a 2-mile network of cracks and openings. While this underground wonder once drew adventurers freely, nowadays, strict safety regulations are in place. To enter, you must have completed rigorous safety certifications and have all the necessary gear. Safety is a top priority for 2 significant reasons. Firstly, the caves are filled with cold, often waist-deep water that can create disorienting white noise. Secondly, a grim incident from 1985 emphasized the importance of these rules. Let's dive into that fateful day. It was July 1st, 1985, around 10 a.m., when Mike and Roman set out for Bronson Cave, an adventure they'd undertaken a few times before. The route seemed straightforward, and the water had been knee-deep on previous trips. Mike was in shorts and a t-shirt, while Roman donned a bathing suit. Each carried just a single flashlight to navigate the darkness. But despite recommendations to have a guide, their prior experience led them to believe they could handle it. As they ventured deeper, they noticed a waterfall at the cave entrance, an unusual sight due to overnight rain. But they brushed it off, assuming the water's depth or the need for swimming wouldn't be much of a problem. However, their day took a drastic turn when heavy rain began just 30 minutes into their journey. Flash flooding led to the cancellation of nearby boat trips. After 90 minutes, they found themselves waist-deep in powerful rapids. Water levels continued to rise, leaving no dry spots. Realizing the danger, they clung to a ledge, waiting for the water to subside. Tragedy struck when Roman slipped and was pulled away by the current. He managed to grab an outcropping, shouting to Mike that he was okay. With the thunderous noise of the water, Mike couldn't hear the words, only the cries for help. After 30 agonizing minutes, Mike decided to brave the water to reach Roman, a decision that would prove disastrous. The current swept him away, crashing him into the cave walls. Roman clung to his precarious ledge as the water continued to rise, inching closer to the cave's roof. Meanwhile, Mike had been ejected from the cave and was now 300 feet from where the water had seized him. Entering this cave is not for the faint of heart. First, you have to squeeze through the narrow entrance, and then brace yourself for 2 vertical drops, totaling 55 feet. It's not only dark but wet, and the sound of water flowing everywhere can be overwhelming. But the promise of the cave's hidden wonders keeps adventurers coming back for more. Miraculously, he managed to grab one of the wooden handrails near the entrance, pulling himself to safety. With great effort, he crawled 400 yards up the steep bank toward the cave entrance, his body battered and covered in blood. An hour later, a park employee stumbled upon Mike, exhausted and wounded. An ambulance rushed him to the hospital where he spent 2 nights recovering from a badly damaged elbow, multiple bruises, and scrapes. Thankfully, he hadn't suffered a head injury, just a gash on his forehead. But what about his friend Roman? As Mike was rescued and recovering, Roman remained trapped inside the cave. The water levels were still too high for a rescue operation. Worried for Roman's safety, the rescue team had to wait for the water to recede. To make matters worse, Roman's strength was waning, and he could barely communicate with the rescuers. The situation seemed dire. Roman, struggling to hold on, heard a glimmer of hope. He thought he heard human voices. The rescue team, working tirelessly, had made their way closer to Roman. At 8:52 a.m., one of them shouted, and there it was, the confirmation. It was Roman. He was still alive. The team was now working tirelessly to free him from his perilous predicament. Finally, the water levels dropped enough for the rescue team to reach Roman. They had to navigate through tight passages, moving rocks along the way. As Roman saw movement and a light approaching, he knew his ordeal was coming to an end. Divers passed him a helmet, a wetsuit, and a flotation device. Roman summoned his remaining strength and donned the equipment, signaling the beginning of his long-awaited journey to safety. When Roman emerged from the cave, his friends, family, and Mike welcomed him with a round of applause. He had spent a grueling 54 hours trapped underground, pale, covered in cuts and bruises, and shivering from hypothermia. It was a miraculous rescue, and Roman's marine training likely played a crucial role in his survival. They had helmets and headlights which helped, but it was so tight they couldn't see much even with those. Once they were both through the entranceway, they began to free climb down the 20 feet of an area known as Nussensdrap. After descending, they found themselves on a relatively long and steep passageway. Again, the water flowed down with them, and they had to take their time so they didn't slip and fall the next steep drop. Soon enough, they saw the floor disappearing down again into the 40-foot main drop. In the dark, it was hard to see the bottom. Eventually, they found some grip holes in the wet rock and began to descend the 40 feet to the cave floor. It was slow going and hard to keep hold of the rock face through the wet mud. But then, disaster struck. The first man managed to get about 15 feet from the bottom when a damp rock slipped through his fingers, and he fell backward to the hard stone floor. He tried to break his fall by landing on his feet, but he felt his ankle snap underneath him as he did. Right away, the other man ran over to check on him. He'd also cut his head open, but worst of all, he couldn't feel anything from his tailbone down. The man needed medical attention right away, but there was no way he was going to be able to climb out on his own anymore. Luckily, the other man managed to scale the walls more carefully, so he managed to get to the surface and call 911 at around 7 p.m. The first people to get there were the Wadebridge Fire Department, but as soon as they got there, they knew it was something they weren't trained for, so they called in anybody from the area that they thought might be able to help. Steve Hazelton of the Vermont Cave Rescue Network was among those called in. Steve immediately packed all of his gear and set off to the site, while his wife made calls to the best cavers in the area. Once they went inside, they replaced the weak anchor points with stronger ones, but there was still another issue at the top of the main drop and the bottom of the Nussensdrap. There were points where the cave narrowed to as little as 14 inches. They had to cut away some of the rock. Once the 2 pinch points had been widened out, they lowered a stretcher down. Steve then put the caver's broken ankle into a field brace and attached the stretcher to the line. Then the team began to raise the injured man, but they had to take their time because he screamed in pain every time they moved. Unfortunately, the entrance tunnel was the most difficult problem in the entire rescue. They had to make the hole bigger if they were gonna get him out of there. Once again, they went at it with air chisels and then attempted to pull him through again. It was slow going, but the man remained patient, even when he couldn't help but scream in pain. Eventually, at 6:30 a.m. on August 7th, they managed to haul him out. An ambulance worker assessed him, moved him onto a specialized stretcher designed for people with back injuries, and then placed him in the back of a pickup truck to drive him to a waiting ambulance. Unfortunately, it was determined that the man had a spinal fracture. This is a story often used as a warning not to go into caves unless you know what you're doing, and certainly not without ropes and harnesses. Now let's move on to our next incredible story. Tank Cave is a vast underwater labyrinth of submerged tunnels and passageways in Australia. To get there, you need to travel to a small town called Tantanoola. It's easy to get lost in this network of tunnels, so before you're allowed to dive there, you have to go through a course, familiarizing yourself with all the main passageways. Most of these have fixed gold ropes to help new divers find their way back, but it's still a challenging dive, even if you stick to the mapped-out routes. Agnes Myloka was one of those cavers who knew exactly what she was doing. She was obsessed with cave diving. Agnes had extensive experience and was a well-respected cave diver. Her passion for exploration was unparalleled. On February 27, 2011, Agnes went back into Tank Cave with one of her main goals being to explore some of those unmapped tunnels. She and her buddy diver then dropped into the main pool, and like before, she noticed a tiny opening just 2,000 feet into the system. This time, after swimming for a while, she got lost in the silt and couldn't figure out how to get back. As she made her way to where she thought her friend was, she took a wrong turn and found herself in a small crack, too small to even move. Her gas had run out just before she managed to find her way back. The search for Agnes began immediately. Divers slowly inched Agnes's body through the system and up to the surface. It was a painstaking operation that took several days. Tank Cave is a place of wonder and peril. 2 lives were lost, but countless lessons were learned. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and remember, adventure comes with its own set of risks, so stay safe out there.